All right, everyone, going to be breaking down the college football Saturday slate here. Let's go ahead and get into it. Now, last week we came very close to hitting both a five slip bet and a 6 slip bet. Unfortunately, we were one off with both of those. The process was correct. We needed one more catch. It didn't come through. All in all, we'll take that double up. That's fine. So the first game that we're going to start out with is going to be Syracuse versus Florida State. And this is really where we are going to be getting our best prop to start the day, at least, or more intriguing props. Let's put it that way. So almost a 20-point spread, game total of 53.5. Obviously, Florida State is expected to win. So we're going to see that in a lot of these, or at least in this game, we're going to see a lot of the props are going to be looking at maybe the potential for under fantasy point. I will say the first two I can get behind. Let's go ahead and start with Allen here. So Allen last week had been someone, or prior to last week, had been someone that had been really consistent and had been going off. Last week was Syracuse's probably toughest match of the season thus far, going against UNC. They got blown out in that game, 7-40, and he really struggled in that game. Didn't score. Well, he scored a touchdown and still only scored 13.6 fantasy points. And so if we see that again, like the same game structure, then it's tough to imagine him being able to get that over fantasy score. So that is one that I don't mind in this game. Now, it's definitely a tight line, and I don't think we need to force it, but if you're looking to maybe potentially game stack this game, you could. And then the next one is going to be Trey Benson for under his fantasy points as well at 16. We can see it's been a little bit of a roller coaster there with him. And part of the reason is he's not getting like a full allotment of snaps. And because of that, we're not seeing him gaining a lot of opportunities. So it's much more big play upside. But in a game where they're going to be heavily favored, it's kind of like, do we really want to take that risk? Those are the two best prop bets that we're getting in this game. So let's just go ahead and move on into the next game. We got ISU versus Cincinnati. We take a look at that game, a 5-point spread, not too bad there. The over and under is pretty low though, set at 42.8. Now guys, this is going to be another one of those games where we are seeing the unders kind of be favorited. None of them are really telling us that we need to go out of our way to bet. I'm probably personally staying away from all of these, but I do want to call out this distinction here, guys. We are seeing PrizePicks probably overvaluing some of the props, especially early on compared to Underdog, and compared to like the sports books, it seemed like Underdog's more true to what the average sportsbook line is, whereas PrizePicks seems to be a little bit more aggressive. So I did want to call that out. There is some spots where, this is a big difference right here. You could bet both of them. Like bet the over on Underdog, bet the under on PrizePicks. And that's kind of a way you could do like a sneaky game stack as well with that, especially with those yards differences like that. Might not make a big difference, but it does add up. And now the next game is going to be Arkansas versus Alabama. Okay, very big spread here, almost a 20-point spread, 19.5. Kind of a low game total as well at 45.9. And in this game, I think we are going to get some kind of interesting props. Okay, so let's start with the first one here. We got Isaac for under 2.5 receptions. It's an interesting one because we look at like his snap counts. We're going to see basically playing every single snap. And so to me, that's probably one that we want to stay away from because 2.5 receptions, that's not that hard to get to. And then the next like closest for snaps in terms of receivers is Armstrong here. And we're actually seeing that's a decent overbet. What's crazy is that there's about, playing 85% of the snaps is still a lot, but with Isaac playing 15% more, it's just kind of crazy. But we are going to see that this is probably one of the better bets for this game for Andrew Armstrong to get over 4.5 receptions. He has been someone that has been productive, especially lately. Those games have all been a lot closer. I mean, Texas A&M, 3 receptions, 78 yards. Maybe that's a spot where we get some sort of fantasy score prop and you guys can use that instead, but not terrible. And then personally for me, guys, I don't really want to be touching these Alabama props too much just because they are spreading out the snap share to those receivers. To me, that's going to make it a little bit more difficult to predict. Really, if you want to go in on any like Alabama props, you are probably just looking at the quarterback, but we're not seeing any big ones here, so big edge props. So let's go ahead and move on into the next game. Now, we got Georgia versus Vanderbilt, a game that is projected to be an extremely big blowout. 32.5 for the spread. I mean, that's crazy. The over and under for this game is set at 54.5. So to me, it's probably going to be very difficult to find big edges here. We'll try to find some. We'll go through the process because you never know. Now, I do think it is worth pointing out that the quarterback that I've been starting for most of the season, AJ Swan, is going to be out. They're going to be going with Ken Seals, who over the last 2 games has been, relatively productive. And so when we're looking at the props for this game, we see Will Shepherd under 4 receptions. And I kind of get why that's one that's kind of popping up there. We can see heavily favored for the under at like 4.5 receptions. And that's why the line is set at 4. But we look at Will Shepherd, we can see he has been someone that has been able to get yards. Even in these games that have been blowouts, like he is still playing the snaps. And so maybe you're just looking at receiving yards from that is one that I don't mind. Like he is literally playing basically every single snap, regardless of if the game's a blowout or not. Now, none of the games have been that crazy of blowouts as it's projected to be in this one. So, whether we want to attack that or not, that's going to be up to you guys. And then from there, I don't know. I feel like we'd be forcing in the other props that are in this game, like no big edges there. So once again, let's go move on into the next game. So the next game is going to be another game that's probably going to be a blowout. So probably going to be faster as well. 33.4 for the average spread, and then a 45.6 for the over and under. So not an appealing game as well. So probably going to be difficult for us to find some really good props in that one. Once again, we'll go ahead and see. Now, I will say, I kind of like this one for Wilson. Wilson has been one of the players that, I've been trying to follow along with college football a little bit more this season. Once again, I don't consider myself an expert. I consider myself just someone who enjoys college football. For the most part with college football, it's a little bit different than NFL, MLB, and NBA, or even NHL as well, where I guess let's just say NFL and NBA, I'm specifically playing those games with the props that we have, and I'm able to apply that knowledge to tell whether or not a line is good or not, and whether or not we should attack that. Whereas with the NCAA, I don't follow it enough to really feel comfortable with giving strong opinions on it. That's why I'm just presenting the data. But I will say Wilson, in the games that I've watched, has been someone that has stood out. Now, the worry is that this game is too fast of a blowout, and he's not needed to, be on the field. And when we look at their snap counts, that's what we're going to see here. They have been blowing out teams, so you haven't really needed someone like him to be playing as many snaps. And while I'm looking at it, I'm pulling up the DVP, not too crazy of stats given up to opposing receivers. So although I do like his talent, 3.5 receptions does seem to probably be a little bit too high, honestly, now that I'm looking through it a little bit, just given the fact that the game could be a blowout. They probably just won't need him to get 4 receptions in this game. And it's not like Indiana has been too terrible. And even the receiving yards seems a little bit too aggressive. He's a good talent and all, but we can see he hasn't been able to get that over recently. And so with that game projected to be a blowout, sure, he could be the reason why it is. But maybe we're just looking at probably not touching that one. And that's honestly kind of it for this one as well. Just with how much it's projected to be a blowout, I'm not exactly sure I want to be forcing in bets. Donovan Edwards is someone that would probably get around 60% of the snaps if the game was projected to stay close, but it's not. So, they all become a little bit more risky there. I'm just going to be staying away, I think. So move on. We got Ohio State versus Purdue. Another game, unfortunately, where it is looking like it could be a blowout. 18-point spread. So we don't love that there, but it is a 52.1 over and under, so maybe we can find some props there. Now, I do want to call out that Purdue has really struggled in terms of production given up to quarterbacks. Lots of touchdowns given up on the ground as well, and that's probably where we want to be attacking them. Receiver-wise, they've casually been decent against them, and I'm bringing that up because you guys will see that the 2 best props that we're going to have are going to be 2 receiver props for Purdue. We got Burks and Miller. Now, Burks' fantasy score is only set at 10.5, and if we look at the receptions and the yards, it's pretty close as well there. Typically speaking, we're going to see it where PrizePicks is going to value a touchdown a little bit more than this. And so I wonder if we look at his game log, if that's literally been the overs, the games that he has gotten a touchdown. Let's take a peek. Touchdown. So yeah, in all but one of the games against Wisconsin, he had a good game. That's because he had touchdowns in those. So maybe a little bit too touchdown dependent in this, but he is someone that has just been playing so many snaps. So it's probably going to be tough to go away from him. Then the other one I want to call is going to be Garrett Miller. Okay, Garrett Miller's a tight end. He did play in 78% of the snaps last week. And so when I'm looking at this, for his over receiving yards, 24.5, I think I'm going to like that one. If we look at the last game, 71 against Iowa. And so to me, this is one I'm going to write down because I do think I want to come back to it. Because once again, we take a peek at those snap counts. We can see 42, 45, 78. We look at the receiving yards. We see, let's just look at the last 2 games. 31 and almost like half the snaps. So yeah, I kind of like his chances to get over 24.5 receiving yards there. I feel like that's a pretty good one. Obviously the game is projected to be a blowout. We're hoping he still gets those snaps and maybe gets a little bit softer coverage. Now for Ohio State, we're not getting that many props just yet for them. The ones that we are getting, I really don't want to touch too much, but want to call us out again. Very big difference between PrizePicks and Underdog here. For Stover, like you could bet the over on Underdog, you could bet the under on PrizePicks. we can see that the average sportsbook line has it set in the middle of that. So maybe a potential edge for you guys there. All right, now moving on into Utah versus California. Okay, not as big of a projected blowout, which is nice. Those last 3 games were crazy, but not the highest over and under for the game total. So interesting there, but it doesn't look like we're getting any props for that game just yet. We are getting props for the game. It's just not worthwhile. Okay, so we're going to move on into the next game. And now we get our first real interesting prop on the day, and I'll show you guys that one. So we got Kansas versus Oklahoma State. This is projected to be a close game at 2.5 points. We can see the game total is set at about 54.5, so a pretty appealing game as a whole. Now, the prop that is kind of interesting, I would say, is going to be this one for Devin Neal. We're seeing under the PrizePicks line, a 17 is the one that is standing out. That's because the average Vegas line mostly has it set at 15.2. They're actually slightly favoring the under there. Now, I will say the projection data has it set at 17.5. If we were to adjust what Underdog's projection has it set at, it'd be set at around 15 for fantasy. And let's start off with why that one's interesting. We're going to see that Devin Neal playing his lowest amount of snaps besides 1 week last week against UCF. Now, that is because they did blow them out in that game. He was part of the reason as to why. But we can see his production has been a little bit sporadic there. And so it like, we pull it up there, and this is like a situation where it almost seems like either he's gonna really crush the over or really the under is going to hit by an insane amount as well. So like on paper, it is looking like the best one that we are getting. I don't know if I exactly believe that or not, but if you guys want to roll with the data there, by all means, that's looking like a pretty big edge that we have there. And that's pretty much the data saying that they don't think that he's going to be able to score a touchdown and then account for that many points. We're going to see we have some other fantasy score props here as well. Pretty much it's almost looking like this game might be a little bit overvalued by PrizePicks. I will take a peek at Ollie Gordon here. So Gordon played his most snaps last week, and I want to take a peek at that, see kind of what happened in that game. And then Bray is going to be the other one for over fantasy points that we could be running out there. We can see that his snaps have pretty much been consistently there. So for Gordon, we can see the last 2 games, he has had a heavy workload, 18 and 21 carries. That is a ton, right? And so I don't know if I necessarily agree with this. I'm actually wondering, let's take a peek. Is that because someone was injured? Nope, they just decided to give him the rock a little bit more consistently in those 2 games. So I'm actually curious about the matchup as well. Is that a matchup that we maybe want to be attacking or staying away from? Kansas, pretty beatable. That's what that's showing us. Oklahoma State, about middle of the road there. You're like a receivers, just because I'm here. Both a little bit harder to defend the receivers. But yeah, I don't know if I exactly agree with this one for Gordon. Does feel like he's a little bit dependent on scoring a touchdown a little bit there. But obviously, if he's going to be getting that many carries, I would almost say like, man, we could potentially do the rushing yards there for him. Kansas a little bit weaker against the run, as we saw. And so maybe that's a sneaky one that we can do. I don't know about you guys, but I don't know. I kind of like that one a little bit more than actually betting the under. I might just write this one down. I feel like that's an edge that we could be getting on the slate. But the one that I liked the most was Bray for over fantasy score. And it's not one that has been consistently there, but it also is one that hasn't been consistently there as well. Like, this is kind of what I like to see when I'm making a prop bet. I like to see not too many peaks or values. I like to see an even line so that when the data is saying, all right, we got about a 53.7% chance to hit, especially with college football, where it's such a roller coaster, it seems like each week. I like that it's like we can believe in that line pretty much is what that's telling me. So seemingly a good line. If you guys want to do receiving yards instead, you could. I like the fantasy score line a little bit better there. All right, so now we go ahead and get into Oregon versus Washington, another game that is projected to stay close, but another game, or really the first game that is projected to be really high scoring as well. So we might have a little bit of a game stacking opportunity here. So let's go ahead and take a peek at the props, and we're going to see we are getting some decent props in terms of like betting. And like this one right here, we got Folk with a 55.78% chance to get over 4.5 receptions. We can see the projection data has it set at 5.1. This is one that we definitely want to be running out. Good EV bet right there. And just looking at the line right now, we can see that he has been someone that has been crushing this over. So it might not be one that is there for you guys, honestly, but if you want to go ahead and attach that to these like discounted props that we have out there, by all means do that. If you guys want to use the Taco Tuesday strategy, by all means go ahead and do that. And like we will see, guys, that he is someone that is just playing a bunch of snaps there as well. So in a game that is not only supposed supposed to be high scoring, but it's a game that's supposed to stay close. We can project him to get those snaps again. And so to me, this is kind of a smash spot. And honestly, we get some fantasy score props for this as well. I think this is a game that we want to be attacking fantasy score wise. I know that the data is kind of saying bet the under for Franklin, and maybe you do that. But all in all, I think we could just blindly stack this game with fantasy score, because I think that's going to be the move. Now, I'm curious for Polk here. All right, I was wondering if we were getting a fantasy score prop for him or not. That's unfortunate, but that is something that you could run out yourself if it becomes made available. Now we're going to see Jalen McMillan here for under 6.5 receptions. That's going to be one where Underdog has already bumped it down to 6 there. And we can see the average sportsbook line is teetering there. The average line is about 6.3, and they're already favoring the under there. So that's another probably one that we want to be using with those individual discounts that are out there. So with those two prop bets, I don't know if those are going to be available by the time most of you guys get here. Make sure to be clicking the notification bell just to be able to take advantage of those props when they are made available. Here's one that I kind of like as well. Over fantasy score, we see the projection data really likes the over there. The average sportsbook line would have the fantasy score set 18, which we don't love, I guess. And that's the thing with PrizePicks. They do seem to be a little bit more aggressive when it comes to fantasy score and their calculation of it, whereas Underdog seems to be a little bit more lower. And so maybe we're just looking at stacking on Underdog. You could bet the over fantasy score there. That's probably a bet that I like, is the over fantasy score there. In terms of Oregon props, if you want to go Bo Nix for over fantasy score, you could. I feel like his lines are all correct. So to me, I don't feel like we're getting a big edge there. Same thing with really the rest of the fantasy score props for all the Oregon Duck players as well. It seems like the edge that we're getting there on that slate is going to be with Washington. So now looking at another game that is going to be probably an appealing game is going to be Texas A&M versus Tennessee, a 3-point spread, a 54.8 average over and under. And so when we take a peek at the props that we're getting here, we're actually going to see that the under fantasy score props are going to be the one that are popping up the most. And I'll say this one was Smith I don't like for the under fantasy score. He is someone that's just on the field a ton. Now, we will see that this is the line that I typically like to see, and you guys will probably see this 4 out of the past 5 games under the fantasy score, and you guys will probably want to hammer that home, especially given the fact that the data is also telling us to do that. I don't mind that, but just given the fact that this game is projected to stay close, that does worry me a little bit. I will say the receptions prop set at 4 is correct. That is probably going to be a push for him. Maybe this is just more of a game stack where we're seeing under fantasy score there, under fantasy score for Tennessee. That's something we could be running out there. Another one under fantasy score. So it seems like we have a few options there where we could be maybe a little bit of a game stack where we're saying that Vegas is maybe not correct about how high scoring it's going to be, or maybe PrizePicks is just overvaluing that game a little bit too much. So here's definitely another interesting one. We got Ramil Keaton, and I want to call this out because last game, you can see only 2 receptions, 25 yards. We look at the game log for him. We're going to see that he only played in 50% of the snaps last week, and that's because he was dealing with an injury. Now he's going to be another week removed from that injury, but the question is he going to play that full allotment of snaps? Because maybe we're looking at under receptions for him. We could be looking at under fantasy score for him. Those are 2 interesting props right there, I would say, especially this one where not only is the data telling us to bet the under, and we have seen him consistently be at the under, but he also could be limited snap share wise. So definitely an interesting one there. And now we're going to see White is going to be kind of an interesting one for the receptions prop set at 5.5. I would say that probably correlates a little bit as well. Now last game was his first really kind of breakout game, it would appear. And so that probably is a little bit too risky for me, but I do think that there could be a little bit of correlation between those two. But yeah, a lot of decent, maybe potential under bets in this game. So now we get probably one of my favorite prop bets on the day as well coming up here. We got Illinois versus Maryland, and it is going to be a 13-point spread, almost 13.5-point spread there. So we don't love that part of it, and I'll get into this, but 51.5 over and under, that is something that I do like. Now let's talk about the one that I like. It's going to be Jones for over 3.5 receptions. This one kind of stands out to me. When we go to his game log, we can see 5 receptions, 6 receptions, 5 receptions, 3, and 5. Okay, so I like how many snaps or how many receptions he's been getting. We go back to the snaps. We can see that the snaps have been a little bit sporadic, I would say, but consistently getting around 75% of the snaps, especially after that first game against Townsend where not a lot of people saw snaps. Now the worry would be the game blown out too fast, and maybe they don't need him to get as many snaps, and that's probably why we're getting this low receptions prop, but to me, this seems to be one that we probably should be targeting for the over 3.5 receptions. From there, there's not that many other props that I like in this game, so I do want to move on into the next game, and that's going to be the last game that I'm covering on this video. It's going to be Iowa versus Wisconsin. Wisconsin is favored by 9.5 points, but we can see a very low game total, 34.5. So that is kind of ugly there. We'll see if we have any good props here. And actually, I know that at the beginning of the week, we had some really good props here that have since been adjusted, but let's just go through the process again. So the issue that has been occurring with Wisconsin in terms of their prop sitting is that their quarterback has been running the football a lot more, so they've been less air raidy, if you will. And I do want to call it the snaps that have been going around. Like the tight end has probably been the most consistent in terms of snaps. Braylon Allen did see more snaps last week, and I want to call that out because Ches Mussolini, a guy that had looked really good, got injured, and he's going to be out. So we did see Jackson Aker get some more work, and he looked pretty good for a young back there. Don't get me wrong, but we're still going to see Braylon Allen probably getting around 70% of the snaps. Obviously, if the game is a little bit of a blowout, you kind of expect him to be able to grind out the game a little bit more there. DK still getting a lot of work there, but only playing 70% of the snaps last week. I was a little bit shocked by that. Green actually didn't see that many snaps. The other receiver, we actually saw CJ Williams get about 50, and they're just spreading it out really at the lower end there with Skylar Bell as well. So to me, if we're betting on players in this game for Wisconsin, it's going to be Ricci, maybe DK, maybe Braylon Allen, and maybe Tanner Mordecai for over rush yards. But let's take a peek at those. And so we're going to see like Will Pauling over 2.5 receptions. Do we want to do that one? Probably not. Do we want to do receiving yards? Probably not. Now for DK, I don't know if I want to do this under. Now I'll show you guys their game logs. Like DK, he has been their best receiver. You kind of expect him to have a good game. 2.5 receptions doesn't seem that much to him. Will Pauling really went out and had an awesome game last week. And guys, yeah, I need to call this out. So this is what's annoying. DK, they're not recording what he did against Rutgers. He didn't do anything. Whereas Will Pauling did have a good game, and we have that data in there for DraftKings here. So it's the tough part about college football is sometimes we don't have the full data set, but it does seem to be a situation where it's either like one of those guys. So I don't know if you guys wanted to like bet the under on one, bet the over on the other, maybe get a little bit of a game stack, you could, but I don't think we need to do that. I will say the line for Braylon Allen is a little bit interesting, especially on underdog. I'd probably be more inclined to bet the over 93.5 rush yards there. Once again, I do think that the game is going to be more favorable for them, but at the same time, maybe someone like Jackson gets a good chance at getting the over there as well. And for what it's worth, Tanner Mordecai has been pulling the football and running a lot more. I don't know if I really want to roll with this one, but we can see 3 straight games now in which we have seen that increase in likelihood for him to pull and run. He has been able to get the over 28 rushing yards. What's funny about this one is like if you just were to slot in like Ches to get 29.5 rush yards, everyone would be like hammering that one. So especially in a game where the Badgers are expected to win by 10 points, that is something that kind of stood out to me. And like, you know, Braylon Allen's going to be part of the reason as to why they get there, but maybe they grind away the game. Maybe it's a little bit more of a blowout and Jackson's able to get the over rush yard. For Iowa, we're not going to see that many good ones here. To me, it's not really worth calling out any of these. I was hoping we would get a good one for Eric Alley again. We're not. So let's go ahead and get into my favorite bets for Saturday. All right, so going ahead and getting into my bets of the day, I will say my 3 favorite ones are going to be these 3 reception props that we are getting, as long as they are still out there when you guys get to this video. Garrett Miller, the tight end, for over 24.5 receiving yards, is a little bit dependent on his snap share continuing to be there, but I still think that that's going to be a good line for us. We do have a little bit of that game just getting ugly fast, but I still think he's going to be in line for those snaps. Ramil Keaton for under 13.5 fantasy score. We saw that was a decent one. And this is not a good EV bet, guys, right here. Like, this would be a much better bet on one of the sports books. But because I want it to be a 6-slip bet, I went ahead and added this one in there as well. You guys are more like, or you guys can toss in any of those other props I already mentioned that maybe didn't make the bet slip. That's going to be up to you guys. But that's going to be all for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the coverage. If you guys want access to that cheat sheet, make sure to be clicking the link in the description below. It is available for just $10 a month. Link to sign up is at 9to5sports.com. All right, thanks for watching. Let's have a good slate. And as always, let's keep cashing.